E te tī, e te tā rarau mai ki te hui. Ko mihi ngarangi tēnei, e mihi atu nei kia koutou katoa. Welcome to the Hui, Māori current affairs for all New Zealanders. E tarawake nei. Ōpōtiki is a town on the verge of a much-needed economic boom. But is the cost too high?
The supply-demand now favours the landlords, whereas previous years it favoured the tenants.
I just couldn't believe what I was looking at. And then the thought of packing up 15 years of memories and furniture, it's a lot to deal with.
And with tenancy laws changing, more whānau are being forced out onto the street.
Yeah, it's not how I envision my family to be, you know, living in a house bus.
We talked to whānau struggling with the rental crisis in Ōpōtiki. Kara hui hui mai. Later, we'll speak to Police Commissioner Andrew Costa about collecting the images and personal data of rangatahi Māori, engari matua I tēnei hōtaka. In the small Bay of Plenty settlement of Ōpōtiki, renters have always had a place to call home. But as the town undergoes a long-awaited economic resurgence, house prices are skyrocketing. Alongside new changes in tenancy laws, many landlords are now looking to sell up. And as the rental market disappears, more and more whānau in Ōpōtiki are being left homeless. Anea John Boynton me te roangake o ngā kōrero.
Our tenancy laws are changing to give renters more rights.
Everyone should be able to live a life of dignity whether they rent or own a home.
But are these changes having the opposite effect?
2 weeks prior to the legislation changing, I received a 90-day notice, along with quite a few other local families.
In the small eastern Bay of Plenty town of Ōpōtiki, the rental market is shrinking.
There's lots and lots of people wanting to come and live in Ōpōtiki, so those rental properties are disappearing.
With more whānau being left homeless.
How long can the community cope if things keep going on like this?
They're not coping now.
As locals losing their homes stand up to tackle the crippling housing crisis.
I feel we need to make a stand because it's cutting our throats. We're the heart and soul of Ōpōtiki. Where are we going to go?
Kayleen Moore's three-bedroom home in Ōpōtiki bears the marks of a decade and a half worth of life.
I've been paying rent here for 15 years, you know. It has a lot of memories.
Any that stand out when you look around the room? Or...
Yeah, going into labour with my third child, Maria. It was hard and fast. I made it just to Ōpōtiki and had her.
Memories that are both precious and painful for the mother of four.
So I lost my older brother about 3 years ago through suicide, and he used to always come and stay here with me. So there's a room that's very, you know, full of memories. It's just raising my babies, going through life's ups and downs. But my home is full of love, full of noisy children.
But Kayleen only has a few weeks left in this home after she received a 90-day eviction notice in January.
First and foremost, I was shocked, then I was emotional and I was angry. I just couldn't believe what I was looking at. And then the thought of packing up 15 years of memories and furniture, it's a lot to deal with.
Do you feel like you've been a bad tenant?
No, I don't. I've had times where I've had delays in paying rent. But no, I am a good tenant. I've looked after this home.
Last year, the government passed the Residential Tenancy Amendment Act, the biggest change to tenancy laws in the last 35 years. The changes will enforce healthy home standards, allow tenants to make small changes to their rentals and bring an end to 90-day no-cause terminations.
I am so incredibly proud of all of those that have invested their time into ensuring that our friends that are dependent on landlords are going to get those houses up to a bloomin' good nick.
But there are also fears the new laws may erode the rights of landlords.
Those who are landlords know that those antisocial behaviours are incredibly destructive, and the idea that there should be 3 warnings over 90 days before one goes to a tenancy tribunal is completely unacceptable.
But Kayleen Moore is seeing the negative side to this law change. She's been evicted, along with a number of other local families.
Did it come as a surprise to you to receive that notice?
A huge surprise. They gave me no reason, and I have been looking since I was given that notice. What I've come across is smaller homes for higher weekly rent.
Kitty Dutton knows the struggle to find a suitable home after she received her 90-day notice late last year.
Kia ora, Kitty.
Oh, kia ora.
So
Come in.
So this has been your home for a couple months now?
About a month.
She ended up camping on the beach and couch surfing, but now lives in Ōpōtiki in a house bus that a friend is lending her.
Yes, it's a lot different. You kind of do get a little bit fed up with living in a house bus, but it's all that we have right now. So this is how I make our cup of teas on the barbecue. So we do fried rice, fried chips, so everything's cooked here. So this is like my outside kitchen. Come and have a seat.
With only a handful of rental homes on the market, Kitty struggled to find support.
First, I went to every organisation in town and to no avail. I had no help whatsoever, so I put a notice on the community notices. Now, I had to eat humble pie when I did that because I'm a pretty proud person. I don't really want everyone knowing that I'm homeless, but it was the community who helped me.
An Ōpōtiki resident led her Pāku house bus on her land, where her 2 sons currently live with her.
Yeah, it's not how I envision my family to be. I've lived in Ōpōtiki for about 25 years, and I've always had a home. I've had beautiful homes. You know, I've always looked after them, paid my rent, and treated them like my own home.
Her youngest son sleeps in the bus with her, while her oldest son, who was sleeping in a tent, now sleeps in a minivan.
These are the summer months. Are you concerned about what issues are going to arise if you're still in the house bus come the winter time?
I have noticed we've had a few cold nights, and it's cold. You know, you need to get the extra blankets out or the hottie out. When it's raining, it's miserable.
The squeeze on rentals in Ōpōtiki isn't going unnoticed by property managers Chris and Joanne Donkin. They own CJ Rentals, one of the biggest rental management companies in town.
We manage approximately 140 properties, and we do own multiple properties ourselves.
The rental market here in Ōpōtiki, what has that traditionally been like?
Difficult. There's been a big change. The supply-demand now favours the landlords, whereas previous years, and that's probably 2 years ago, it favoured the tenants.
Ōpōtiki was always considered very cheap, and unfortunately we were sort of lined up with the likes of Wairoa and Kawerau and Hastings, Flaxmere areas. So cheap accommodation, cheap to buy and cheap to rent.
A lot of people might look at people who buy a lot of homes in lower socio-economic areas and go, is that akin to being a slumlord? You know, what's your response to people who might fire that argument your way?
So my take on that is the simple fact that it's generally a mum and dad investor that are just trying to get a little bit ahead in life.
And I think most landlords have always been committed to bringing the quality of their property up, especially if they have bought something that isn't up to standard. As property managers, we've always pushed for that. We started insulating properties years before it even became fashionable.
The couple have issued 8 90-day notices in the last 3 months, and Chris Donkin understands why landlords are worried about the law changes.
I guess the concern is that having damage or a disruptive tenant in the property and the non-ability without major issues going through tenancy tribunal to remove that tenant. July 1, with the new heating and ventilation rules, there's certainly landlords that will be selling their properties prior to that law coming in. Just the sheer cost, you know, it's around $5,000 to retrofit a property.
Harcourt's Ōpōtiki is another major player in the rental market, managing around 100 homes for landlords. They didn't want to appear on camera to talk about Ōpōtiki's rental crisis, but in a statement, rental manager Wendy Moore says,
many mum and dad investor landlords have had their rental properties for many years, and in some cases have had the same tenants for many years, and low rents below market rent guidelines are common. As values increase, selling becomes a more attractive option for rental property owners who do not now want to deal with the cost of compliance and upgrading their properties.
But for Kayleen Moore, this attitude from landlords isn't good enough.
They should be looking after their home like I do as a tenant in it. You would think they'd want their homes to last the distance, so keeping them compliant, keeping them warm and dry, doing the maintenance on them. Would they live in a place that is not up to standard, with their own families? I don't think so.
Coming up, how the community here in Ōpōtiki is trying to find its own solution to the housing shortage.
So there's a lot of hard work ahead still, but the reward is knowing that we're going to have people in here.
Auraki mai anō. Ōpōtiki is a town on the comeback, with the government targeting it as a future place of growth. But as interest grows in the seaside settlement, will locals already struggling to find rentals be priced out of their community? Anei te wahanga tūro o tēnei ripoata.
Ōpōtiki is known for its breathtaking coastline, a gateway to Te Moana Atoi. Once a forgotten rural outpost, the town is undergoing an economic resurgence.
Ōpōtiki's been put on the radar. The government's pumped $150 million into a town redevelopment, new library, $27 million for the mussel factory. So there's huge infrastructure going on in Ōpōtiki, and I guess Ōpōtiki's being noticed.
And this investment is driving up house prices.
There's lots and lots of people wanting to come and live in Ōpōtiki, so those rental properties are disappearing. We've lost 15 to 20 properties in the last 12 months through properties being sold, and they're no longer rentals.
If you look at the increase in the market in Ōpōtiki over the last couple of years, you'll see that houses have gone from 200,000 to 400,000 or 500,000, and they're selling quickly.
Mandy Smith is from the emergency housing provider Whakatu Whānau Trust. She understands why landlords are looking to sell up in a red-hot property market.
I don't know what we're going to do about that. I mean, the only way we can do it is to provide more housing stock and just try and drive the market down. But then that's going to take time.
But there's not enough time for the whānau the Trust supports.
You do know when you meet with some of these whānau just how badly they are feeling. They can't provide for their children with a roof over their head. They go intense cars, whatever it is that they can do to try and provide some form of shelter.
But some relief is on the way. Whakatu Whanauna is putting the finishing touches on this new transitional housing complex. Currently, there's just 2 emergency houses in the whole district, but 41 families on the Trust waiting list.
That might not sound very big for bigger regions, but for Ōpōtiki, it's pretty big in number, because when you look at that by the number of people within the home, you could be looking at 170, 180 people that are displaced. Yeah.
But the Trust faced a 3-year-long battle to build these new houses. They received some government funding, but also had to take out a mortgage to fund the project.
So there's a lot of hard work ahead still, but I guess the reward is knowing that we're going to have people in here and we're going to be able to at least house some of our people. It's transitional housing, so it's only 3 months, but we can apply for an extension if we feel the family have tried really hard, but there's nowhere to go. And unfortunately, it seems like we might be just not moving anyone for a little while.
But Kitty Dutton says while transitional housing will help, it's permanent housing that is needed urgently.
I know that there's places that try their best, but, you know, if you got to stay in a house for 3 months, then you're in the same situation after 3 months and say there's another family moving in, you know, you're in the same predicament.
For Kayleen Moore, knowing the level of need in her community is devastating, and she feels landlords are only interested in cashing in.
They're fine. They're lining their pockets and they don't really, I feel they don't give a damn about us smaller people, little people.
So she's taking her fight to the streets.
We stand as one, homes for all.
Alongside Kitty, she's marching through downtown Ōpōtiki,
Everyone deserves a home.
bringing awareness to the rental crisis and homelessness.
Having a voice for the community and getting our message out there is what our march represents, and it's letting our locals know we have a crisis, we have a huge problem right now in Ōpōtiki.
Yes, I'm proud of my friend for organising that. You know, it's for the people who are homeless and the eviction notices. I know this is nationwide, all over New Zealand, but it's very much so here in this town.
Property managers Chris and Joanne Donkin don't believe landlords are adding to the problem.
We consider what we do personally as a service to the community. We're in the process of building 3 new rental houses at the moment. 1 is nearly completed. So we don't see ourselves as a problem, we see ourselves as offering a service.
But it's a service Kayleen can't afford, and she says she'll likely have to move in with her parents, but doesn't want to be a burden on them.
What do you want people to know about what you are going through?
How hard it is for me as a solo mum, not being able to provide a roof over my children's head. I hope it doesn't off-rail my children, have an effect on them, because they've called this place their home for 15 years since they were born. And just the thought of not being able to provide for my kids, I feel like a failure as a parent. I do worry about their future because this is what I'm going through now. How's it going to be for them in 10, 15, 20 years?
You want them to have a future, a brighter future.
Yeah, I do.
And if you were to find a home and have that security again, how would that make you feel?
It brings a smile to my face straight away.
Nā John Boynton tērā pūrongo. Hei muri ngā whakatairanga ka kōrero ahau ki te kai komihana o ngā prihimana kia Andrew Costa. Tauti mai anō. Tonight, police have announced a new major research project focusing on fairness and equity in policing. It comes amid criticism after an RNZ investigation revealed police are alleged to have photographed innocent rangatahi without their parents' consent. Nō reira, hei matapaki I tēnei take, kei konei ko te kai komihana matua o ngā prihimana ko Andrew Costa. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, it's been nearly a year since you joined us on the hui. Nau mai hoki mai.
Kia ora, thank you. Nice to be here.
At the time, you acknowledged there was unconscious bias within the police, so a year later, you're launching an independent research project. What's the aim?
We want to understand what's going on in the areas where people are concerned. We know that there's a lot of debate and some of it emotive, understandably, on these issues, and we really want to get to the bottom of that in a way that fairly reflects the great work police do, but also understands where we need to work, if anywhere, to be fair.
Independent, so led by...
Yeah, so we're working with Te Puna Haumaru, which is the New Zealand Institute for Security and Crime Science at the University of Waikato. We are also working with Tā Kim Workman as an independent person to oversee the research that we will do with the university.
How wide-ranging will it be? You know, what sectors of society do you want to reach and hear from?
So we will be speaking to a lot of people, including community people, to understand where the issues are that we need to dig in, but also our own people, so that we can make sure this research reflects the environment in which we operate.
I guess people will be wanting to know if, you know, how independent the findings will be and whether the recommendations would be binding.
Yeah, so obviously working with the university means there's a lot of integrity to the research, and they will drive that according to their standards, but overseen by an independent panel, which Tā Kim has very kindly agreed to chair. And as you all know, he's not someone who will shy away from calling issues where they exist, and he has done that consistently.
Binding recommendations? I mean...
Oh, look, I think it's not in the nature of necessarily going to, you know, exactly to the letter of everything that needs to be done. The point of it will be to understand whether there's bias in parts of our operation.
So the thing is, you've already identified, you know, there's unconscious bias within your ranks. Why not just put the energy into dealing with the internal prejudice and racism that's already there?
Look, our people come to work to do a great job, and they do a great job, and so it's really important for us to bring an objective basis to this and understand the specific areas where we need to work. Some of the areas where concerns have been expressed are in who we stop and speak to, the way we use force, and in our prosecution. So we want to drill into those areas. I think it will reflect a lot of great work by police with and for Māori, but it also may identify some areas for improvement, and we're really open to that.
I want to quote the first line of an opinion piece you wrote last week for the New Zealand Herald. This is the first line, and I quote, "Is it just me, or are we having trouble making up our minds about what we want?" And that you related that to criticism of police failings, to scanning for bomb threats at Christchurch mosques, with the practice of taking photographs that you just mentioned of innocent Māori. How are those two related?
The point there really was on everything we talk about in terms of policing, there are trade-offs. The community expects us to keep people safe, and that's our role. And one of the ways we do that is by understanding what's happening out there in the environment. Now, look, I don't for a moment defend the taking of photographs of young people where there's no reason to. It's against our policy, and if it's happened, we'll deal with it.
It's happening, so I'm just wondering, you know, you wrote that, so how are you relating those two together? Because I just wonder, where in our history can you pinpoint a single act of terrorism performed by a Māori youth?
No, look, the point there was not about terrorism, it was about intelligence for police
But you wrapped it together, that you wrapped it up together, and that's what it does. It sends a message that you're comparing the two or joining the two.
It certainly was not my intention to address the issue.
Was it a mistake to write that?
It was not my intention to conflate the two things. The point I was making is people reasonably expect us to keep the community safe, and so we have to find ways to do that that are fair to all people. And as I also said in that article, there is no place for taking photographs of young people in breach of our policy.
Can you understand how those families, both the Muslim community and Māori whānau, would be deeply offended by that connection?
Yeah, I think if you read the whole piece, you get the context from that.
I did, and then you said it's about joining the dots. So once again, which dots are you joining between terrorism and Māori youth?
So I'm not drawing a connection between those two things. My focus there is on how police gather the information we need to keep our communities safe. And sometimes it is appropriate to speak to young people, not obviously in relation to terrorism, but in relation to crimes that our community expects us to deal with.
Yeah, and so you mentioned it earlier, so I'll raise it, photographing young rangatahi without their parents' consent. Is that good practice?
Of course not. And where there are issues there, we invite people to come forward. There is an IPCA inquiry going on. You know, we have thousands of interactions every week across the country, and if sometimes we get it wrong, we will front up and deal with those things.
What's your message to officers that are practising that behaviour?
It's not okay. I have sent that message personally to all of our officers to reinforce what our policy is, and I would expect them to be following it.
Because part of this research project I've read further down, it's about acknowledging the treaty and the unique position of tangata whenua. So when this anecdotal evidence is coming through, not only just in one province, Whanganui, Wairarapa, and I think in Auckland, you start to see a picture. And can you understand how Māori feel targeted by that?
Oh, look, I completely understand the concerns in the community, and that's why we want an objective lens on this that actually looks not across a handful of interactions, but across all of our interactions to understand whether there are areas we need to shift.
Is that something, opinion piece writing for national broadcasters, that you're going to continue doing? I wonder about the practice of it. Do you think it's a good... do you think it's fair that the Police Commissioner gets to, have such a platform?
What I'm looking for is balance in the way we talk about these issues. There's a lot of complexity in what we're expected to do for the community, and all we ask for is balance. We do not shy away from dealing with the hard issues. That's why we're open to this research and what it may find.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for balance.
Yeah, I was kind of talking about the opportunity that you got to write an opinion piece. Can you see the inequality of that situation, the powerful, writing about the powerless?
Oh, look, it is a privileged position that I hold, and I don't take that lightly, and I'm really open to hearing from people, and that's why we're embarking on this process of understanding these issues through an independent lens. So I totally recognise that.
A positive story this week, Te Pai Oranga, 9,000 people through there diverted out of the court system into panels. Since you came on last time, you said that there were going to be some, I think, some treaty workshops, some unconscious. How's that kind of work going?
Yeah, look, we have had some really good engagement across particularly our senior leaders on issues of unconscious bias. The conversations on these things need to be led by leaders through the organisation, and those conversations are well underway.
Are you happy with the Pai Oranga panels? Is that something that you want to grow?
I'm delighted with Te Paranga. It is making a massive difference for people. It is responding to their personal circumstances in a way that the mainstream system often struggles to do. We launched a new one last week in Taranaki. That's now 16 locations underway, and we have a desire to do a lot more because we think it is a much better alternative in many cases. Do you have a time frame for the research project? We're going to do the first phase of this up to the end of June, which is a stock take and understand what's already out there in terms of relevant data and work, and then the program will be scheduled out from there. So we'll have more come that time.
Tēnā koe, thank you so much for coming on this evening.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Ko Andrew Costa tērā. Hei tērā wiki. It's the valley in Northland that time forgot.
Did no one ever say this is a place that needs attention, that the government needs to step in here, that the Crown has a responsibility that it's ignored for 180 years?
Whānau in Utakura are living in the most desperate conditions.
I consider myself quite lucky to have what I've got. Some haven't got anything.
What do you think your tūpuna would think about seeing the way whānau are living here today?
It's not acceptable. It's not good enough. And while I'm still breathing, I'll continue to disagree with what's currently happening for our people.
Ko hikina te hui mō tēnei pō, mō kore anō kia rere ngā mihi ki te iwi mahometa o Aotearoa, e kore rawa mātau e wariwari. Pai mariri kia tātou katoa. Hui is made with support from New Zealand On Air.